Hello, everybody. It's Saturday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. I believe it's the last daylight savings time show of the year. My name is Chris Weuve. This is Starfleet Tactical. I am here tonight by myself, except I've got Lissa in the background, keeping things on the straight and narrow. And so, hello, Bob, who made it just back in time from TravelerCon. I wanted to go to TravelerCon, but like everything was full, so I didn't even try to go to TravelerCon this year. I am by myself. Last week, of course, I had Andy and Pat with me, and I decided that I'm going to sort of like do last week the same topic kind of again. And that's because we kind of got off track a little bit. And I decided that there was a bunch of stuff that I wanted to say, and that I'm sure there was stuff that Andy and Pat wanted to say too. In fact, I know that there was stuff that Pat wanted to say that we didn't get said. So I decided it was good to sort of do another do another version of that. So that's what I'm going to do tonight. So here's the agenda. Do the admin stuff as usual. I'll go a little bit more why we're doing this again, a few caveats. I want to talk a little bit about relative sizes of stuff because the Babylon 5 stuff is just all over the map, including Babylon 5 itself, the station. And then I'm going to have a few thoughts about Babylon 5 combat. And so let me preface this by saying Babylon 5 is one of my all-time favorite TV shows, but not for the combat. And so let's do admin stuff. So you'll notice that this has changed a lot. There's a lot less green than there was before. Now, the overarching theme of this, the reason why this all changed, is mostly the following. I am in Woodbridge, Virginia, working at my new job since I retired from federal service, and I retired from my previous job where I was the senior war game project manager at the Air Force Research Labs headquarters at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, you all notice that this is the first time I think I mentioned that I worked on Wright-Pat before, and I mentioned that I lived in Dayton. This is the first time that I mentioned that I work at the Air Force Research Lab, and that's because I have a policy that when I do stuff, I don't talk about my current employer. I just don't talk about them. Air Force Research Lab, as of 30 September, is no longer my current employer. In fact, they don't even do wargaming really anymore. They kind of got rid of all that stuff. It wasn't clear that that's what they were going to do when I left, but that's definitely what they've done since then. And so I can now talk about the fact that I was doing wargaming for the Air Force and at the Air Force Research Lab. But in any event, I still have what I call my strategic book and game reserve, which is a fancy way of saying a 10 by 20 storage unit in Dayton, Ohio. And so every now and then I get the urge to go and look upon my books and maybe sort through some of the books, maybe take some of them to Goodwill or some other place like that, and maybe load up my car with, say, 10 crates of games or boxes of books and bring them back to Virginia. And so at some point, I need to make at least one more trip where I sort of assess whether these one-off trips make sense. And if they do make sense, I'll continue making them. If not, I'll just have to, at some point, I'm going to hire a truck and some dudes to move the rest of my stuff. But the question is in the short term, does it make sense for me to cull it a little bit? My original thinking was it did, because I would like to dispose as much stuff in Dayton as possible. I'd like to make the truck smaller. I'd like to make the cost of this move less. And there's a few things I want sooner rather than later. And so if I go to Dayton and spend a little bit of time, I can create enough space in my storage unit that I will have the space to get to all the books and sort of do stuff. Right now, it's a very tight fit. So this is a long-winded way of saying I may be like going to Dayton every 2 or 3 weeks. And if I do that, I'll go on the weekends. And if I do that, I won't be doing the Starfleet Tactical because I'll be busy slinging books around. That's why all this stuff, like all that stuff, those ones in December that used to be yes, now it says some yes, some no. I know I'm doing shows in December. I may do shows every Saturday in December because I may decide that it's not worth doing this. Or I may do, every 2 or 3 weeks, every other week, every third week, I won't do a show because I'll be doing the traveling. So that's what's going on with this. Watch the YouTube channel, watch the Facebook page, and that'll tell you what's going on. So, and the rest of that, in terms of stuff that's in the queue that I want to do, that's all, none of that's changed. None of that's changed. So, as always, despite the fact that that it's still not the opinion of AFRL, even though I don't work there anymore, or any of my other past or present employers, nothing I say should make you not enjoy something you currently say. I'm going to say a few things that are kind of harsh about Babylon 5, or could be interpreted that way, but I say them out of love. And I'm going to be putting up some illustrations. Most of them are actually clips from the TV show. Some of them are not. I'm going to try to critique some of the things that I see, and I'm putting them up because A, they're cool, and B, I think by critiquing them, I can offer some educational content. And so I'm putting them up for purposes of criticism. But everything I show is the property of whoever owns it. It's not mine. I'm not claiming it. Okay, so also, by the way, have you pre-ordered Joel Presby's Ringer yet? Because it comes out sometime in like early to mid-November, and so if you can pre-order it, it'll increase the sales and it'll make it show up better in Amazon searches. So. Yeah, I agree with Dustin. I think it does need to be visually updated. There's parts of me that wish they would go in and do that. There's other parts of me that sort of say like the things that I would change in the visual updating are probably not the things that they want to change, because a lot of the things that I think are broken are not the things that they think are broken. I can live with the fact that it's got 1990s era special effects. That doesn't bother me. It's the other things that bother me, I don't think they're actually going to fix. Okay, so why do this particular episode again? Since, like I said, last time we did a show, which was at the very tail end of September, I think it was, Pat was on the show, as was Andy, and we talked about it. But the last episode was a little bit disjointed. I didn't really have time to prepare. Usually, even if we're doing sort of a question and answer show, I at least sort of think about what we're going to talk about. Usually when there's guests on the show, I will get together with them. Like when Pat's on the show, Pat and I will spend like an hour talking about what we're going to talk about on the show. And I wouldn't say that we have the conversation in advance, but we do have at least part of the conversation in advance. So we've got a pretty good idea of what we think is going to be important in the show. And so we sort of move in that direction. We didn't have time to do any of that. And we kind of got distracted by a lot of stuff. We did a really good job of distracting each other. Pat was pretty much on topic, but Andy and I and Lissa all did a really good job of distracting each other, and we kept trying to come back to it, but I think we left some money on the table. So this is about picking up the money that we left on the table. When I first thought about doing this, I asked Pat, because he did a tactical analysis of the Battle of Proxima 3, and I asked Pat, hey, can I borrow some from that? And he said, yeah, go ahead, take it, do it. And now I'm not going to. And the reason why I'm not going to do that is because I haven't had a chance to rewatch that episode. And, Pat's got a pretty good analysis. Let's save that analysis for sometime when Pat comes on the show again. And so Pat and I have been talking about, we want to do more Babylon 5 stuff. It's easy for both of us to do when he comes on the show, because he's watched the show relatively recently. I just have to watch a couple of episodes. I put together some sort of framing slides and we can have a conversation. It's a very easy show for us to put together. Doesn't involve a super amount of work on my side. It just involves the planets aligning so that his schedule makes it happen. And so next time we do that, let's try to do the Battle of Proxima 3 as part of that. And Pat can tell you what Pat thinks about all that. And so we're going to go ahead and save that. But I am going to present a few things that I think are of relevance. Now, I'll warn you in advance. You may recall that I canceled a show because I thought there was a chance that I was going to be coughing my lungs out. Those of you who are longtime fans of the show know that periodically, basically anytime I get a head cold, it turns into a chest cold, and I will have a simultaneous flare up of acid reflux, because when I'm like just living my life, I am 30 seconds away from having a huge coughing fit, because that's just the way my body works. And so I am sucking down Ricolas like there's no tomorrow. Did you know that you can buy these from Amazon in bags that have 110 Ricolas in them? And I have currently in my bedroom over there about 800 Ricolas, because I have about 8 bags of them. And in this last time around, I've gone through about a bag so far. So at some point I may pull one and pop it in. At some point I may cough a little bit. I'm not dying. I'll be perfectly fine. But it did impact my ability to do the show. Yes. And Lissa is getting married on Halloween, which coincidentally happens to be the 25th anniversary of my divorce. So good luck to you, Lissa.
I forgot that was the case. I feel like you told me this before, but
yeah. And so let me emphasize, there is no metaphor there. I had the easiest divorce of anybody ever. The divorce happened on relatively good terms. Things have sort of gone a little sour since then, but hey, I hope the ex is living her best life. It just happened to be, though, the way when you get divorced, at least in the state of Virginia, at some point they send you a letter that tells you when the paperwork was processed through the court. And so you get this letter like 3 weeks later. And so I got this letter towards Thanksgiving that said, "Oh, congratulations, your divorce went final," effective the date on this letter, which was the 31st of October. And it also happens that I know where I was on the 31st of October of 2000, because I went to a friend's house and they're really seriously into Halloween. And so I remember doing the Halloween thing with Dave and Marge, especially Marge. Halloween is her holiday. And so I remember that.
I was like, Marge is a woman after my own heart.
Yes, she really is. She really is. And I'll tell the story real quick.
I don't have a spooky blanket on my lap right now. No.
So my job was to lay in a lawn chair, sort of a chase lounge, with a tarp over me. And when Marge said, there was some key phrase that she would say, which was like, "Have a good evening and stay safe." And when she phrased it a particular way, what she was saying is, there is nobody within range of you, Chris. You can jump out of the chair. And so I would jump out of the chair when she said those words. It meant the kids were far enough back from the sidewalk that I could jump in front of them and do the thing, even though I couldn't see shit. And there was one, I remember a couple of kids came up, there were maybe 10, 11. One of them saying, "There's somebody on the chair. There's somebody in the chair." "No, there isn't. There isn't anybody in the chair." "No, there isn't anybody in the chair." Well, there was somebody in the chair. So in any event, back to where we were. Let's see. There's a bunch of questions. I'll go through questions at the end. Hello to everybody who just came on. But we'll do questions at the end. So moving forward. Okay, a few caveats. Like I said, I love Babylon 5, but not for the space battles. I think it's better at political intrigue. I think it's better at the big picture storytelling. I like the fact that JMS wrote like almost every episode and he knew where it was going. And so when you go back and you rewatch the series, you'll see like that there was this thing in episode like 4 of the first season that didn't actually become relevant until like episode 12 of the 3rd season, right? Like how they did the purpose of Soul Hunter is to show that there are souls and you can suck them out of bodies and you can move them into other bodies and you can move them around, right? And so in order for this entire reincarnation thing to happen, Soul Hunter sets the stage for the fact that Jeffrey Sinclair has a Minbari soul based upon the triangular widget that they used to scan him. And so, there was lots of neat stuff about how that all played out. But I'm not as big a fan of the space combat as other people might be for reasons I'm going to tell you. Once again, nobody should not like anything because they've listened to me, right? My purpose is to make you educated consumers. I love Babylon 5, right? As I've said in the past, I love the movie Field of Dreams, despite the fact there's not a damn thing in that entire movie that makes the least amount of sense, but I love that movie. And so I'm not trying to get you not to like it. So please don't blame me if it, I want you to be an educated consumer. So the standard TV show caveats apply. It's a TV show. There's constraints they have to do with. They got a small screen. They're trying to show everything on the small screen at once, so they sort of cram stuff in. It's a vehicle for discussion about interesting topics, and that's one of the reasons why I like talking about it. I'm going to try to treat it like it's a coherent whole, sorta, in all of this. And some of this is going to sound familiar because there's stuff I've talked about before, right? This is episode 176. It's not the first time I've mentioned Babylon 5. Last episode was not the first time we mentioned Babylon 5. So you've heard some of this before if you've been around for a while. Now it's probably a good time to reiterate. You'll note that I might say we did a long episode on that, but I never say, I'm not going to talk about something because we've already covered it at some point in the past. Because I see a lot of new names show up now. And so I don't want this to turn into one of those things where in order to appreciate today's episode, you have to watch the previous 175 episodes. That's not where I'm going with this. And the other thing is my thinking changes over time. So some of you who may recall, like when I did naming and typing ship classification systems, when I did the pre-World War I naval arms race stuff and how that developed through the 30s, et cetera, my thinking evolved over time. And so the second time I went back and did those topics, I had observations that I hadn't necessarily put together the first time. So I'm sure that there's a bunch of those topics that I'll sort of run it through the converter, figure out how to work it into something else. And, that stuff those are sort of foundational things. They'll make another comeback. And Babylon 5 is a foundational thing for this show. Okay, so let's talk about relative sizes a little bit here. And let me go ahead and do that to make it a little bit bigger. And so this is one example of relative sizes. Now, I will note this is not the only example of relative sizes. We're going to see that in the next slide. But I have circled some of the other ships that are significant. So the upper left-hand oval has the Warlock, the Omega, the Hyperion, and the Nova. I didn't do a good job of getting all the Hyperion, all the Omega there. Sorry about that. So that shows you approximately how big they are compared to the Babylon stations. Shows you Babylon 4 and Babylon 5. We'll talk about that again in a moment. And you see the Narn and the Centauri in the Minbari Harlan class. I only circled the one Minbari ship. But you get a kind of an idea of how big these things are, at least in terms of how one particular person, some guy named Dan Carlson, who updated this 10, 11 years ago, how big he thinks it is based upon whatever he's found that's published on this stuff. And so there's lots of numbers that are published on the Babylon station, Babylon 5 and all the ships, etc. And spoiler alert, some of those things changed over time and they're not really always consistent, right? Sort of like the Defiant in Deep Space Nine. How big is a Defiant? Well, yes. It's as big as you need it to be that week. Okay, so take a look at this comparison. So let me go back for a second. Here's the comparison. Look at the Babylon stations. Look at Babylon 5 compared to Babylon 4. Okay, Babylon 5's a smaller station, sort of total mass-wise, but it's a little bit longer. Does that match with this person's conceptualization of it? I don't think so. That Babylon 4 looks way bigger than that Babylon 5. So as I've sort of hinted at, the sources are really inconsistent. even, or maybe even especially the authoritative ones, because you see things that should be authoritative that don't match what we see on screen, like the B5 encyclopedia. By the way, if you want the B5 encyclopedia, you can get what they are billing as the complete final edition of the B5 encyclopedia, and then they're going to stop selling it, and that happens at the end of the month. So if you want the B5 encyclopedia as an ebook, that's the only version they have right now, you need to buy it by the end of the month from their website. Their website is going to go away. And this is the website that for the last 20 years, you've been able to buy all the B5 memorabilia, all the scripts and stuff like that. It's all going away. But I mean, like the stuff that's in the B5 encyclopedia about the Omega doesn't match what people said on screen, let alone what people have said in sort of like beta canon type sources, let alone, what people have done when they've measured this against that and tried to figure out what the various scales are. It just doesn't match. So for instance, what we see is inconsistent and illogical. I should have said the Omega crew is listed as being, and sorry, I got that line is full of typos. The Omega crew is listed in one source as being 250 people. In another source, it's listed as being 1,000 people. But that ship is also listed as being 1,700 plus meters long. 1.7 kilometers. And it's got a crew of 250. Even if you think it carries a lot of troops, it's still a tiny crew. I mean, if you're doing a 3-watch rotation, that works out to about 80 people per watch in all the various standards, plus some people that don't stand watch. Like the captain, my guess is, doesn't stand a watch. Captain of a US Navy ship doesn't stand a watch. The XO doesn't stand a watch because they're basically on watch all the time. There are times that they're on the bridge, there are times when they're on the bridge, but there's always an officer of the deck on the bridge running things. There's always a tactical action officer in combat running things there. They will go to where they need to go. If they go to battle stations, the captain goes to combat. The XO goes to the bridge, and they sort of become the senior officer present in those two locations. But they're not standing a watch, and my guess is that I'd be willing to bet the chief engineer doesn't stand a watch either, unless he's standing a watch he might actually stand a watch as TAO, as tactical action officer, because that's how that kind of works. So in any event, it doesn't make sense to me that the crew would be so small. Breaching pods, remember in Severed Dreams when they do a breaching pod attack on Babylon 5, how many pods were there? Handful, right? Garibaldi had enough beef to just sort of go and deal with it. If you're in a 1.7 kilometer long ship, how many troops do you think? Several 1.7 kilometer long ships. How many breaching pods do you think you could launch? So there's a particular Reddit commentator who said some cogent things about this, and he makes the observation that JMS kept making the White Star bigger. That's consistent with other things I've said. It sort of seemed to start off as sort of like a small ship, say, I'll just call it Corvette sized, right? Whatever. It's a small sort of patrol ship type thing, but it ended up being like 470 meters long in the end. That's what the official number is that it's like 470 meters long. Did that look like a 470 meter long ship at the beginning? No, but it turned into this giant thing at the end. Same thing happened with Harlan, is that at one point JMS just sort of made it almost a factor of 3 bigger than it was before. Went from 600 meters to 1,600 meters. Doesn't make any sense to me. So what about Babylon 5 itself? Okay, we know that it's 5 miles long, right? That's what the claim is. But this Reddit commentator Worthhead says, Babylon 5 itself was retconned. It was designed by the CGI team to be 11 miles long with the carousel, the rotating cylinder part being about 5 miles long. This makes the speed of the station's rotation correct to generate 1G along the floor of the garden. That's an important clue. If you look at how fast it's rotating, you get 1G on the outer cylinder if it's 5 miles long. However, JMS seems to have decided that this might be implausible because B4 was even bigger still and downgraded the entire station to 5 miles in length. This is consistent with everything I've ever seen discussed on the subject, by the way. So I think he's absolutely right on this. And one of the people who's commented on this is Ron Thornton, who worked on the show, one of the senior guys on the show. He said, it was always a 1 mile wide at the floor surface of the centrifuge, a little wider at the outside diameter, right? Because the centrifuge is, it's got thickness. So there's levels down there. The centrifuge was also 5 miles long, the station being bigger than that. Only the centrifuge is the 5 miles part. The docking and command sphere, the power section at the rear make it a lot longer. So how much longer? Let's take a look at that. Okay, so here we have an illustration that I put together actually some time ago. I just took a stock ruler image and sort of pulled it out to make it all seem to fit. And so I got 10 miles for the end of the reactor section through the end of the sphere. The docking fork ends up being like another mile on the front, and sort of partitioned tried to line up the various pieces. And once I did that, and then I put a ruler next to it. And so I end up with something that looks like it's 11 miles long. And those small numbers at the very bottom are sort of more specifically narrowed down. So, but that appears to be how big Babylon 5 was originally intended to be, and that's what the special effects say it is. But then it was later retconned to make it smaller. And of course, Babylon 5 shows up with all the ships against it. So you see Omegas, you see Charlans, you see the Cortez, that exploration ship. They all get put next to Babylon 5. And so now you've got a question about, okay, so did JMS just change the scale of all the other ships at the same time? So as a little sidebar, okay, so this is a little project. I said that I put together that illustration a while ago. That's because I've been working on this little side project. So this is what I do when I'm not thinking about Starfleet Tactical. So how about turning Babylon 5 into an interstellar colony ship? What if I wanted an interstellar colony ship that looked like Babylon 5? And so, okay, change miles to kilometers. So instead of being 10 miles long, it's 10 kilometers long. Make the rotating cylinder stationary and hollow. And so it's basically the outer hull of the ship. If you do that, you can put in rotating habitation modules. So, and there's a couple out there that I think fit really well. If you go with the Kalpana station module, you can make a Kalpana station that's twice as big as what Al Globus said. Now, Al Globus picked the size of the Kalpana station because it was, in its current size, it was capable of being made with current materials, right? Current material science would let you make something that big. The Avalon station, which is detailed there's an entire issue of the Journal of the British Interplanetary Society that is dedicated to the Avalon station. It is twice the size of the Kalpana station, and obviously could not be made with current materials because it sort of outstrips that, but it's a pretty good fit. So either one of those is a pretty good fit for something that you could just slot into place. And then if you made the rear an engine of some sort, I sort of envision turning the globe up front into a ram scoop of some sort, so that you can sweep up interstellar medium to either give you propellant or at least give you hydrogen and other materials that you might want for manufacturing, etc. You do all that stuff, and voila, you have an interstellar colony ship with at least theoretically habitats that you could deploy when you get in system, because they're designed to be deployed. Now, I haven't gotten into all the details about the habitats because we're really talking about Babylon 5. There are things like, Kalpana is really designed for a relatively low orbit below the Van Allen belts because it really doesn't have the shielding necessary to be above it. Avalon Station has a rotating counter shield, so it could actually be in a higher radiation environment. And there's a lot of interesting things about the design that were designed, like it's got really long tubes going into the spaceport areas. And part of the reason why it's got the long tube is to make it difficult for radiation to have a straight path onto the inside. And so part of the radiation protection is just basically it's a long tube that you can't really, it can't get a good shot down it. So there's not a whole lot of radiation that can come down the tube. So in any event, I love the Babylon 5 design, and I think you can do all sorts of nifty things with it. Okay, so let's talk about the one of the elephants in the room, and that's physics in Babylon 5. So I would argue there's a lot of rule of cool fakery. So what do I mean by the rule of cool? And that is, we're going to do something that looks cool even if it doesn't make any sense. And Star Wars is heavily about the rule of cool. Star Trek can be about the rule of cool. I would argue that Babylon 5 is just as much about the rule of cool as those other ones are, despite the fact that there's at least this claim that it has realistic physics. On the surface, some of the ships look like they obey the laws of physics. Now, I'm going to concentrate on Earth Force because the Minbari and some of the other races, the Vorlons, et cetera, have that nifty gravitic technology. Who knows how that works? That's certainly not based on vector math, but until the Warlock came around, humans didn't have any of that stuff. And so basically I'm talking about people that still have to have spin habitats in order to generate artificial gravity. Those crowd, of which Earth Force is a primary example, on the surface it looks like they obey the laws of physics. We see Star Furies flipping end over end and engage in counter burns. I need to go in the other direction, so I flip over end, and then I burn, and then I start going in the other direction. So, hey, that looks kind of great, right? Well, only kinda, because the Star Furies are inconsistent. They frequently seem to flip over and they decelerate for about 3 seconds, right? They've been burning along for hours. They decelerate for about 3 seconds and they move in the other direction. Then they start moving in the other direction. Now, admittedly, the camera, the sort of virtual camera, because it's all CGI, the virtual camera is moving too, right? We know that it's moving too. So this may be a point of view issue. It may not be that it actually stops and starts going in the other direction, although I seem to recall that we do see it with other background objects, other ships, etc. And that certainly seems to be the case when there's something else functioning as a gauge, something you can gauge it against, like, during a battle or something like that. It's certainly, whether a battle is a unique situation, whether or not is another thing. Like perhaps it is the case that at a battle you don't ever go your full speed, and so like when they're going off to a jump gate to go deal with some raiders or something, that may be dramatically different what's going on than when they're in a battle. But I will point out that we never see any other Earth Force ship do this other than Star Furies. Do we ever see a shuttle flip end over end to land? Do we ever see any of those freighters coming into Babylon 5 flip over end over end to decelerate so that they can come in? Do we ever see an Omega flip end over end, or even turn sideways, right, to do thrusting off from a different direction, right? Do we ever see anything that looks like vector movement for anything other than a Star Fury? So what we have is Star Furies do vector movement wrong. Nobody else does vector movement. We see some radical direction changes for things like white stars, which, Vorlon technology, Minbari technology, okay, they don't count in this particular thing. We do see them turn sideways and then start immediately going in that direction. Who knows how their drive works? But for the things that theoretically are subjective to vector movement, they don't act like vector movement. So that's why I give them a B-. I mean, I give them an A for knowing that their technical background means something like this might be necessary. Although admittedly, I actually think that this is giving them too much credit. I think they're just doing a rule of cool, and they thought this was cool. So I don't think they're paying lip service to it, but they don't understand what the lip service means. So I give them an A for kind of having a vague idea that maybe it should go that way. But I give them C for inconsistent, incorrect execution of that. So, okay, let's see. Next slide. The Omega class destroyer. There's no consistent source on the Omega class. It's always, who knows how big it is. It's 1,700 meters plus. Crew 100, 200, 250, 1,000, who knows. How many troops? What's its mission? It says it's a destroyer. What's its mission? Now, you might ask yourself, why is this a destroyer? Because we know what destroyer means in like the US Navy and the British Navy, and you know what the destroyer means in the 20th century. I'm not going to get all wrapped around the axle about it. It doesn't act like a destroyer, and the destroyer is bigger than the cruiser. And I'm not going to get wrapped around the axle for a couple of reasons. First of all, we don't know what their naming and typing classification system is. We don't know what they define a destroyer as doing. We don't know what they define a cruiser as doing. Second, relative sizes have changed over the course of history, right? We now have destroyers that are bigger than World War II cruisers. Certainly pre-war cruisers. I mean, Dreadnought was something like 18,000 tons, and whereas late war battleships were like 60,000 tons, right? So the definition of battleship sort of changed. Earth Force seems to be undergoing. Earth Force in Babylon 5 is taking place during a time of great technological change, right? There's a lot of changes in Earth Force. So yeah, the Hyperion class cruiser is a lot smaller than an Omega class destroyer, but even if they think about destroyers in the same way we do, which I don't think they do, even if they think about cruisers in the same way that we do, which I have no data on, it might just be that the Omega is a post-war design, and late war design, or it's just a more modern design, and as a result, it's way bigger. And we keep the old ones around because we got them, but it might just be that this is technological change, that it's the equivalent of comparing the Dreadnought to an Isla class. The other thing is these rules change over time, right? The US Navy had this happen. I've talked about it a couple of times. In 1975, the US Navy decided to realign its naming and typing conventions to fit with what the rest of the world was saying. And it used to be that we had these things that were sort of like called patrol craft or patrol corvettes or something like that. And then we had destroyers, and then the next biggest ship was a frigate that was kind of envisioned as a destroyer leader, and the next biggest ship was a cruiser. And at that point in 1975, we decided that frigates were going to be smaller than destroyers because that's the way the rest of the world did it. And those patrol corvette type things became the Oliver Hazard Perry class, and some other things. They became frigates. And for the ships that were previously designated as frigates, if they were smaller size ships, they became destroyers. If they were larger size ships, they became cruisers. With the stroke of a pen, we changed the naming and typing. So I have no idea what the rules are for Earth Force, and I don't know if they changed the rules along the way or what. I just know that we just don't have that information. So I don't get wrapped around the axle about calling this thing a destroyer. It is worth pointing out, though, when you start talking about breaching pods, et cetera, that this is in the middle of a civil war. I suspect that their normal manpower pipelines are not working, at least the way they're designed to. And so it's entirely possible that they've got ships that are operating on skeleton crews, that when it came time to do the breaching of Babylon 5, that they just didn't have enough troops to launch more breaching pods than they had, or something like that. I mean, you see this in Battlestar Galactica too. At one point, the Cylons actually get guys on the station on the Battlestar, and I want to say there was some question. There's a conversation they have, and it's pointed out that they've got like 7 Marines. on the entire ship. They just don't have, they're not very deep, and they had to send people that weren't necessarily trained for that to go deal with the infiltrating silence, the boarding silence. That's just the way it works. Okay. Yeah, Stephen Wright points at one time cruiser wasn't even a ship type. It was a mission. And so it eventually turned into a cruiser is a ship that is designed for the cruising mission, but all that changes over time. And so, you know, it's changed over the course of the last 300 years. I expect it's going to change over the course of the next 300 too. Okay, so from a tactical standpoint, and y'all have heard me talk about this episode in the past. Maybe I don't think I've ever mentioned it that specifically. It was shadow dancing, but if you know the series, you knew the episode I was talking about. This is the one where they're going in and they're going on the offensive. This is a planned operation. Sheridan has been planning this operation. He's in the war room. He sets it all up, et cetera, et cetera. He gets the Drazi and some of the other non-aligned nations on board, and they do this joint task force that has Minbari and Drazi and the saucer guys, the Vereen, maybe, and the Earth Alliance ships that are with him, and all these folks, right? So they've got all these people going in, and it's just. They win, and it supposedly is sort of working the way that they think it is, but I kind of look at it as a naval analyst and go, this is kind of a shit show. It has what they always have in Babylon 5, which is everybody's sort of, you know, cheek to jowl. All the formations they're too close. I mean, if nothing else, you look at these formations and say, aren't you blocking field of fire? Don't you have weapons that you can't fire because there's other ships and other allied ships in the way? Maybe if you spread out a little more, you could actually shoot more of your weapons at the bad guys. And in some cases, they're in such tight proximity that if I were the helmsman, I'd be constantly worried about crashing into somebody, because they don't really have a whole lot of options for maneuver either. You've got Sheridan micromanaging in this battle. He's calling out he's got like 100 ships on his side, and he's calling out to individual ships. USS Umtifrats do X, do Y, et cetera, et cetera. If you're doing this right, he's got subordinate commanders, and he's given them mission type orders. And so they understand what the plan is, and they go do stuff. And he's also giving orders for a bunch of things that should have been in the pre-brief. You know, little ships cover big ships. Medium-sized ship, do this, you know, fighters take the point, blah, blah, blah. That should all be in the plan. Now, as an alternate view, it is worth pointing out that this is a coalition force that has never worked together before. And that's actually a really big deal. They're kind of limited. They don't have a common doctrine. Now, I look at that and say, like, you wouldn't put them all together. Right? You'd operate in sort of national squadrons. You might give these guys a task. I need you to be on our left flank and sort of hold them off while the guys over here do this other thing. Mixing them all up doesn't work. But, you know, okay, it's a coalition force with limited common experience. I understand why Sheridan might have to be a little more chatty than he would be if he was dealing with Earth Force. And just because Sheridan says it in the battle, I guess doesn't mean it wasn't in the pre-brief. All that, you know, little ships cover big ship stuff could be something that was always in the pre-brief, but you know, he's making sure that they remember that because they don't have this common doctrine to work from. And so he's reinforcing a message yet again. Okay, that happens in the real world. You know, sometimes you remind people of the thing that you've already said to them, right? What is the rule about presentations? Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them, right? So maybe this is the equivalent of that. And as always, it's a television show on a small screen. And I will note, none of the writers have any, to the best of my knowledge, have any naval experience whatsoever. So what seems natural to me probably doesn't seem natural to the writers or the directors. Okay, so I think that's the second to last slide. Yeah, it's the second to last slide because I just want to talk about this thing because I think it's cool. So we're talking about something just because I think it's cool. And this, I don't know where this originally comes from. I know that it shows up in Babylon 5 Wars. I know it shows up in a bunch of things. I don't remember ever seeing it on the screen. Maybe it's there and I just missed it. I think it's a fan design, but I could be wrong. Now, it says gunboat, but it's huge. It's 200 meters long. That's like bigger than an Arleigh Burke class destroyer, and it's clearly bigger in the other dimensions. I mean, it's about the length of an Arleigh Burke, and it's way beefier. I mean, this is a big ship. But the thing that I really like about it is it's got these modular weapons packs. So yeah, it's kind of LCS-like. It's got this mission module thing. It's got these weapon packs that it can put on. Here it's got a missile pack, but there are other packs it can put on. I went looking for, I found a source that like had some notional packs that it could put on. I couldn't find them. But it's got some interesting capabilities here, and I kind of like the design. Even though I think calling this a gunboat, yeah, I know that when we sent battleship places, we called it gunboat diplomacy, but I wouldn't call a battleship a gunboat. This is a pretty beefy ship, although not necessarily by Babylon 5 standards, but by our standards, it's pretty good size. And I really kind of like the design. So like I said, I wanted to showcase it. I have no idea where it comes from. It's a pretty good design. It's perhaps has too many weapons, but that's kind of a Babylon 5 thing. They like just sort of hanging weapons off of places. You can get it. There's some places that will sell you like resin models of it, both big and small, like 3D printed game size models. And then there's also some big ones. And like I said, I think Babylon 5 Wars had one. Okay, so I'm going to pull me back on the screen. That's the one I want. Okay, so I'm going to scroll back up to the front and start looking at questions. So if you got a question, throw it in. Yeah, like I said before, Dustin, I think I'd kind of like to see, they've talked about rebooting Babylon 5, and there's a lot of interesting things in there. If JMS claimed he had this 120-page outline, and there's also like a 20-page outline, and I've seen the 20-page outline, and you see Babylon 5 in it, but it's got a lot of differences from what they ended up doing. But one of the things he talks about is that if you're going to run a show for 5 years, and you don't have pre-planned off ramps and on ramps, if like an actor leaves, you're a fool, right? And we know that they had problems with that, right? They had the problems with Michael O'Hare basically having a mental breakdown and having some severe mental health problems. And so that actually in some ways kind of made it worse because they couldn't just recast the role. And it also means that they had to do the show finale halfway through season 3, right? That's in a 5-season show, you don't usually have the finale halfway through the 3rd season. But they had to do it because he was getting worse. And they wanted to be able to close off that storyline. You also had Andrea Thompson leaving. I mean, you may recall she'd been given this huge amount of special powers from her telepath friend that they had done the experiments on. And so she potentially was going places, and then Andrea Thompson left the show. So Talia Winters is gone, Andrea Thompson is gone, and they bring back Pat Tallman's character, who I'm totally and completely blanking on the name of the character, but they bring her back, and so they need her to have superpowers, and so there's an on-ramp. Yeah, Lita Alexander. They bring back Lita Alexander, and they have to have like this on-ramp to give her the superpowers, and in that case, it's the Vorlons. So for all of the major characters, there was an off-ramp, and then there was a bringing another character on to take over the essential story arcs. And if you look at it, you can see originally it was supposed to be Sinclair, not Sheridan. And originally it was supposed to be Catherine Sakai getting caught by the shadows, not Anna Sheridan. You see all of that set up. You see her encounter the old ones. You see the fact that there's, there are greater powers at work here. And you see exactly what had the meaning of the relationship, right? That scene where Catherine Sakai comes back into Sinclair's life. JMS is on record as saying that he couldn't watch the rehearsals because those scenes were autobiographical. He was pulling from the real world to write those scenes. And Catherine, the actress that plays Catherine Sakai, was just fantastic. And imagine what the emotional impact would have been if instead of Anna Sheridan, who, we didn't know Anna Sheridan from a hole in the wall, right? She wasn't a character that we had any familiarity with. Think about what it would have been like if it had been Catherine Sakai and Sheridan. And Sheridan has to realize that Catherine Sakai has succumbed to the dark side of the Force and she's now evil, right? She's working for the bad guys. And it's not really her anymore. I think that would have had a lot more impact than Anna Sheridan did in that. So, but that's how that ended up working. You know what? Let me go ahead and remove that and bring me back to the 4 unless we need to go back to that. Okay. Let's see. Hello, Olive. What do I think of Skydance buying Paramount? I have a little bit of an opinion. So first of all, I think Paramount has done a great disservice to the fans. I think Paramount has done a great disservice to the franchise. I'm not a fan of what Paramount has done. I am not a fan of Skydance because of the people running it. And so from that standpoint, I think that the good news is that, nuking the Paramount, hopefully they nuke the Paramount management team and they start over because, maybe they can breathe some life into a franchise that I don't think they've done a whole lot of good with. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that Skydance is the people to do that. From talking with Alec seems, at least in the past, he was happy with Skydance taking over. So we'll see. As always, I'm not a big fan of the various flavors of New Trek. I don't particularly like the JJ verse. I don't particularly like anything that Alex Kurtzman has done. But those are my opinions. And if you like the stuff that either the JJ verse or the Alec Kurtzman stuff, hey, more power to you. I will say negative things about Kurtzman and JJ. I will not say negative things about the people who like it. So go ahead and like it. Don't take it personally, unless you're Alex Kurtzman or JJ Abrams, especially JJ Abrams. If you're JJ Abrams, feel free to take it personally, what I have to say. Bob says he hates acid reflux. Hey, me too. Luckily, I only have silent acid reflux. Well, I occasionally have mouthful of acid reflux. Usually if I just don't eat right before I go to bed, I don't have to worry about that. I have silent acid reflux, which just basically means my stomach sort of, lets a lot of vapors out of the stomach and it tries to dissolve the back of my throat. And I can, if I start coughing a little bit, I'll go to the mirror and shine a flashlight in the back of my throat and I go, oh shit. Yeah, it's acid reflux. Every doctor, when they look in my throat, they go, you've got acid reflux, don't you? It's like, yes, I do. It does mean I get to get scoped every now and then. Yeah, acid reflux, irritating sinuses, it does all that stuff. Let's see. The Triluminary. Yeah, that was what the widget was called. So thank you. Yeah, JMS had to do a lot of rewriting, and JMS, JMS, good for him. JMS told a lot of lies about it. right? Because Michael O'Hare hoped to get better. Michael O'Hare knew that reputation was everything in Hollywood, and if word got out that he was having mental health issues, that it could be the case that he never worked again. And so he was trying to avoid the word getting out. And so JMS came up with this elaborate story about how, we realized that he was going to go off and do the thing, and it wasn't really going to work out. We didn't really need his character around. And it's like, at the time, it sounded like the network had come in, put a gun to JMS's head and said, you either get rid of Michael O'Hare or we cancel the show. And JMS had said, all right. Right. But the thing is, you don't throw the network under the bus in that situation. And so it really sounded like JMS was, I know a lot of fans, I was certainly one of them, who said, yeah, this is all the network and JMS is lying about it. Well, it turns out JMS was lying, but he wasn't lying about the network. He was trying to protect somebody.
Look, I would rather them protect the actors.
Yes.
Personally, like that's not our fucking business, and I would rather.
I had no need to know.
That's his personal health.
None of us had a need to know.
Like, he was doing everything he could to talk around the issue and let O'Hare have his privacy.
Yep. I totally and completely agree. So
more directors need to be like that. Like, if it's not our circus, not our monkeys. So,
Mr. Straczynski, if you're watching, I have no issues with you lying to me about that.
Yeah, no, I would much rather him lie about something like that when it's not our business to know about to begin with.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, let's see. We got Dustin saying the Earth Force Omega is about the same size as the Diridex. Maybe. Just based upon the numbers that you see published, but I'm not sure that I believe any of those numbers.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure I believe any published numbers until we actually hear something from JMS.
The thing about the Babylon 5 numbers is there's a bunch of numbers from a bunch of different sources, and they don't match what we see on the screen. And there's just all sorts of reasons to be skeptical about any of the numbers. There's just all sorts of reasons to be skeptical about all of it. And okay. It's just, you see some of the illustrations and you go, okay, 11 miles is about 25 kilometers. No, that's too much. It's about 20 kilometers, maybe 18-ish. I don't do math in your head late at night. And I sort of look at the little 1.7 kilometers. So 1.7 kilometers is about a mile, right? Okay, so do those things look like they're 1/10 as long as Babylon 5? Maybe not. But then Babylon 5 changed size to be 5 miles long. Do they look like they're 1/5 as long as Babylon 5? No. Okay. All right. Whatever. I'm not going to get wrapped around the axle because there's so much about that stuff that just has never been settled, in part because I don't think that JMS really cares, right?
Yeah, he was about his storytelling and not about the sizing of everything.
There's nobody, we talked about this the last episode. There is no equivalent of Rick Sternbach on that show.
Yeah.
Ron Thornton is probably about as close as you get, but there's no equivalent of either Sternbach or Okuda, right? There's no equivalent of a couple of guys that are going to make it all make sense behind the background. At least if they are there, I don't know who they are. For Star Trek, you can point to a whole bunch of people. You can point to Sternbach and Okuda and Probert and all these people that are at least trying, some better than others, but they're at least trying to tell a consistent technological background. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was that. And I think that JMS, hey, I like that idea. Yeah, now it's official. I think there was a lot of that going on. I agree. It was him agreeing with a lot of headcanons after the fact, because he didn't necessarily understand the scaling necessary for some of it. And he was like, oh, that sounds good. Yeah, sure. That's it. I will say this.
You put up with my shit so much.
I will say this. JMS is 2 orders of magnitude better than Joss Whedon when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah.
Because like for Firefly, Joss Whedon's, when people would say, "Is this all taking place in one solar system or what?" And he'd say, "I don't care." Like, really?
We've kind of gotten official stuff. So like the Firefly TTRPG actually gave us a solar system something to try and make sense of it based on what we were given in the series.
Joss Whedon's entire attitude was, "Why are you even bothering me with this question?"
Yeah. And like, on the one hand, I get it, but also like,
yeah. Well, I mean, my response to that is do you want your story to hang together, or do you want people going, "Hey, wait a minute, I just fell out of the story because you did something that's inconsistent with something I remembered previously," right?
Mm-hmm.
There are some stories where I don't care. Field of Dreams, don't care, right? Because Field of Dreams does not engage you on an intellectual level. It engages you purely on an emotional level. Firefly is kinda...
Yes. Also, to be clear, fuck Joss Whedon.
Yes. I mean, I've got no reason to defend the man, and I won't. I also...
Yeah, no, like, so here's the thing. I enjoy a lot of Joss Whedon entertainment. The man himself is a piece of shit.
I will stipulate that I am willing to believe that he is a piece of shit. I have not spent any time whatsoever coming up with an independent assessment of whether I think he's a piece of shit or not. I know that a lot of other people say that there's a reason to think that he's a piece of shit, and I am willing to default to the position of, I'm going to assume he's a piece of shit because everybody else says this. And they say it in a way that is consistent with that being the truth, right? It's not just a bunch of people don't like this guy. It's a no, really, there's evidence. And it's like, I haven't looked at the evidence. Other people say there's evidence. It seems to be pretty consistent. So I will.
Yeah, I did look into it at one point.
Which is fine. I mean,
harassing some of his leads, and we'll just leave it at that.
We don't need to go down and do the list of Joss Whedon's sins, other than the sin of not caring about telling a consistent story, which I think is the sin that we care about here. I will acknowledge the fact that there is potentially many other sins that he has, just like other people say, for instance, I don't know, Gene Roddenberry. There are some sins there as well. Okay, let's see. There was one other one I wanted to throw up here. Okay, Olive said, wouldn't be entirely shocking if Babylon 4 was more ambitious and Babylon 5 is last tri-scale. Yeah, in fact, that's explicit.
No, I think that's exactly what they established too.
Yeah. They
let's be real. Babylon 5, because the other ones had either gone missing or been destroyed, they put it in a remote area in the hopes nothing would fuck with it.
Yeah,
and because it was in a remote area, that means you're having to move a bunch of material to a very far location.
They've made the argument that they already paid for the station 4 times, and even getting a line of funding to even build the 5th one was problematic, and that they weren't going to build the deluxe station anymore. Now, one of the things I don't understand is we never saw on screen Babylon's 1 through 3. We see them in sort of fan art, etc. My question for all the people doing the fan art is, why do you think they all looked different?
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that at some point they'd say, like, why don't we just build that one again? Right? Yeah. If we're going to build another one,
we've already made the blueprints.
Yeah, we've already got the blueprint.
My freaking school system
did supply chain, right?
I'm not even joking. 2 of the middle schools in my hometown, literally, they took the same blueprints and just copy pasted on a different piece of land.
So back in the 1930s, they built these small schoolhouses, of which my mom graduated from one. But there was this one particular format of school that they built in every little town in America. They just it was the same blueprint. They just cranked them out. And you go up a set of stairs, and there's a gym on one side, and there's three classrooms on another, and you go up, and there's another set of 3 classrooms, opposite.
Mm-hmm.
They're all over the place.
We didn't have stairs,
and
they made ours ADA accessible.
My sister worked at a college at one point. She's a college professor, and she worked at this college in Tennessee where they had built a new dorm. But when they built the new dorm, they had cleared off the pads for 5 dorms, and they had poured the foundation for 5 dorms, and then they only built like 1 or 2. And so because the plan was they figured they'd need them at some point. As long as you got the bulldozer and the concrete guys out there, you might as well just go ahead and prep the sites for the other ones. So they put in all the plumbing and prepped all the sites, etc. And their plan was, when we need the other dorms, we will just build the exact same dorm again and again and again. Of course, why do anything different? Why make it harder than it has to be? Okay.
Exactly.
Let's see. Scrolling down.
Olive points out that we do see a shuttle flip when they visit Zathras.
Do we see it flip to decelerate, or do we just see it sort of flip around to land? I don't think we ever see. I mean, we see helicopters will come in and they'll orient for landing, but I don't think we ever see one decelerate that way. We don't see it flip and then slow down by that way. Scott Voigt points out lots of automation. I assume he's talking about the Omegas. Yes, indeed. Babylon 5 being a bigger habitat doesn't mean all that space was filled or open. Yeah, what we see is basically redressed Babylon 5 sets, so we don't know what Babylon 4 looked like on the inside, other than it's a lot like redressed Babylon 5 sets.
I mean, and also, let's be real, like, a lobby's a lobby.
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what the actual habitat ring looked like. It's probably very likely, given the size, they probably had like a much larger like arboretum sort of thing, since they had that giant garden for that one area where they had illegally started planting coffee.
So Olive asks, what's a Charlin? The Charlin is the circle in the lower left-hand corner. Well, it's on the right-hand side, but it's the lower left circle. It's that Minbari, the standard Minbari cruiser. That's a Charlin class cruiser. Okay, so going back to here. Oops, I didn't mean to make Alyssa go away.
It's fine. Oh,
I don't
somehow
like that.
That's worse.
Yeah, there's the one I was looking for. Dustin says Babylon 5 stats is 5 miles long. It
depends on what you consult.
Yeah.
Again, there were a lot of differences in opinion, and JMS kind of just was like, yeah, that's headcanon, fine.
Yeah, I mean the thing that I think is important is that the special effects guys all say, yeah, the rotation is correct if you treat the cylinder as 5 miles long, and hence the cylinder is a mile wide. That's the rotation we did to get 1G. And so if you assume that they wanted for 1G, by the way, when the actors are walking around in the sets, it looks like they're walking around in 1G. Even when they're in 0G, which is what they should be in that control room. But we won't go there.
Stop making sense.
B4 could simply rotate slower and have the same gravity with less Coriolis force. B4 could rotate the amount of rotation that you need to get a particular amount of centrifugal force, which you can pretend is gravity, is dependent upon the size of the thing you're rotating.
Yes.
So Babylon 4 is bigger, so it probably is rotating slower. Let's see. How many ships could Babylon 5 blow up without a sweat? I have no idea. I do know that they put in more of a defense grid, but the defense grid really seemed to be about dealing with small stuff. It really didn't seem
it seemed more about like dealing with like space junk, honestly.
Yeah, and the defense grid was more the equivalent of anti-aircraft and missile interception than it was the equivalent of battleship big guns. We don't really have a good feel for exactly how much beef Babylon 5 itself has, how much capability it has, other than it's got the great machine in background. And that was one of the things that drove me nuts about Severed Dreams, is that Sheridan makes the decision to reveal the existence of the great machine. Not the fact that a great machine exists, but that he has some secret capability to use it as a public address system.
You're not wrong when you describe it that way.
It's sort of like, I've got this secret system that I can use to access everybody's phones, right? I've got the magic secret software that lets me break into everybody's phones, and I'm going to use it to remind you that it's February and Shamrock Shakes are available at McDonald's.
Okay, but isn't that technically what the notifications from like Samsung and whatnot are?
Well, yeah, but they don't. Yeah, but we know about it. And the thing is, doesn't Babylon 5 have a public address system?
Yeah. They've got the intercom system.
Part of that episode made no sense to me. But I think that JMS actually had this problem with the Great Machine, right? Yes. He created the Great Machine. It's a great homage to Forbidden Planet. He does a little bit of things with the Great Machine, but it also means that there's like Babylon 5, when the other Earth Force ships came in, Delenn shows up and immediately saves the day, but she did that about 5 seconds before Sheridan was going to say, get me what's his name at the Great Machine, because now's the time when he needs to do the thing. Right? Because he specifically said, I've got this ace in the hole. I'm not going to reveal the ace in the hole, right before he revealed the fact that he had some special powers. But it's like that's a great scene, but I'm also very aware of the fact that he had a hotline to like the God button. And he was reaching to pick up the hotline so that he could call the Great Machine and say, hey, by the way, can you nuke these guys for me? Yeah, thanks. Talk to you. Yeah, lunch on Tuesday.
Sounds but that's like the equivalent of like launching the A-bomb when you don't have to, I think is why they didn't do that.
I understand why he didn't use it earlier. My point is the Minbari show up and save the day. No,
it's not necessary, but at the same time,
they really didn't save the day. They really didn't save the day.
At the same time, I think it's also supposed to be like symbolic of the Minbari starting to take their side.
My point in all of this was the Great Machine, from a storytelling standpoint, the Great Machine causes problems for JMS because Sheridan has a God button. And he even had to go so far as to explain why he wasn't going to push the God button. But he explained by saying, I'm not going to push it yet. He didn't say I'm not going to push it. He said, I'm not going to push it yet. Okay, he's still got the God button. He can push it whenever he wants. All right. Okay, scrolling. Do Babylon 5 starfighters, Scott Voigt says, to have compensators to take care of the heavy Gs? No, the Earth Force ones don't. That's they're G limited. The presumably like the Minbari ones, etc., do, because they've got magic anti-grav technology, and all you need to have is gravity plating that sucks you towards the front, and that prevents you from acceleration sucking you towards the back. But the Star Furies don't, and
you're still suffering the full force of G's, whatever those G's might be. But because you're in space, like velocity and gravity are slightly.
So one of the things that this means is that there's no way that like a Minbari fighter should be able to just run rings around a human.
Oh yeah,
because the humans are G limited to about maybe 6 Gs, whereas the Minbari are not.
So. If that, because like 0 Gs in space, like you might be like stressing your body even more depending on like how that works out.
So Stephen Ross asked, is the Star Fury burning constantly or are they coasting? We see them burning constantly on occasion. We do see them burning constantly.
Yeah, no, I do remember saying that, like, and if they're not, they're at least doing bursts.
Okay, scrolling. All have said most of them had to pour through a jump gate in that, didn't they? Is that the Battle of Proxima 3 that you're talking about? If they I'm sorry, shadow dancing. If they did, they poured through a jump portal that was created by the ships. They didn't go through. This one? No, I'm down a little bit more than that.
Okay.
JMS can do big story notes, but can't write a battle. Yep. Yeah. Scott Voight says,
this is the obvious answer. Zathras does not like doing paperwork because of blowing the fleet up.
Yes.
That's why they didn't click the God button. Zathras said no paperwork.
Scott says, I like the way they do it in the Honorverse. Just give the plan and let the captains do it. Yeah, I mean, in the Honorverse, they're famous for, Honor Harrington looks at the display and then says, execute Alpha 4. And then everybody knows what Alpha 4 is. And, I'm rereading the longest running science fiction series of all time is a German series called Perry Roden, of which the first 120 were translated into English in the late 60s, early 70s. And I ended up getting a bunch of them when the Thor Power Tools decision happened and everybody dumped their backstock. I ended up buying a metric shit ton of these things because I could get them like 8 for $3. And I read them at the time and thought they were okay. And I've decided to reread them. And so first of all, they're not okay. They're absolutely horrible. They've got some interesting ideas, although the number of interesting ideas per unit of time is not as high as I remember it being, but it's still got enough that I'm sort of an anal retentive completist. I said I'm going to read them all, and God damn it, I'm going to read them all. And so I'm working my way through it. And one of the things that I've noticed is that
chat, Chris is a masochist. This is what we all heard, right?
Yes, I'm a masochist. But one of the things that's actually kind of interesting about rereading them is one thing they do get right is Perry Roden is constantly saying, execute plan Bravo. I mean, he will do that. He will do that. And there's so very, very, very many things that is wrong with this series, but that's one of the things that's correct. So I'll give him credit for doing that.
That's fair.
Okay, so scrolling.
Scott says he's on book 13 right now for about the 4th time.
Yeah, I need to. I haven't read the last couple. I need to get caught up.
Not many, if I remember correctly, Justin.
Let's see. Stephen Ross says that he thinks the Babylon 5 reboot is dead. Not surprising. They all die. All the Babylon 5 reboots end up dying. And when they went to make the movie, there was going to be this big movie, and it turned out to be a bunch of stuff that all took place in one room with some CGI effects to show.
Look, I just want them to remaster it. That's all I want.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that.
Like, I would love for them to update the early 90s CGI.
I don't think they'll make it better. I mean, they'll make it different, and it'll be better from the standpoint that that the water won't look like plastic. But I don't think they'll make it into a better story in the process. And
fine. Again, it's a remaster. Remaster is just updating things for new tech and updating like graphics.
Yeah, but the thing is that I don't think that they'll make something that will be worth spending the extra money on. Let me put it that way. And I don't think that they'll make something that will make their money back. Because remember, they remastered the original series for Star Trek, and they had good luck with that, and remastered TNG, and apparently that didn't really work.
Well, also you have to think when they remastered TNG, that was like right when streaming services were starting to be a thing, and that's where that metric comes from. It's not necessarily that it didn't do well, because I know for a fucking fact I've seen like BBC spamming the ever-loving shit out of TNG's remaster.
My point is, the last I heard was they said it wasn't worth the effort. And so that they weren't going to remaster Deep Space Nine and Voyager because the TNG effort did not make its money back.
Well,
and I'm not convinced that I don't think it helps the franchise for Babylon 5. And I don't think that I think that one of the things is, like, if they do it and it turns out to be a big deal, then hey, yeah, that's great. It makes Babylon 5 look like something they should put money in. If they do it and it turns out to not work, like, for instance, have you enjoyed all the sequels to Firefly after they made the movie? The movie didn't do well.
No,
Firefly's dead. I mean, Serenity killed Firefly because it didn't work.
Well, it killed Firefly because Joss pretty solidly killed the franchise with that ending. Like, he literally gave them, like, but to be clear, there are comics, there's multiple TTRPGs, there is an entire book series as well now, I think.
Yeah, it's all on the margin.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that there's not, but like he very solidly ended the storyline with Serenity is why.
Yeah, but I mean,
it was the last hurrah, as Olive said.
Well,
that's right, Olive. Probably the last one burned down, fell over, and sank into the swamp.
Yeah, he's talking specifically about the Babylon stations there.
Yeah, I figured.
Scott points out different prime contractors for the various Babylon stations. That's why they look differently.
That's probably the best reason.
The question: what is my favorite Star Trek novel that is not an adaptation of a screen production?
Oh,
I don't think I necessarily have one.
I have one, and it's part of why I got pissed off with what they did with fucking Picard and the Borg.
What one is yours?
Oh, I'm trying to fucking find it in my Google Books.
I've only read a handful of Star Trek novels, and it's been I read some in college, but I haven't read many since then. And I generally find them to be at least a little bit disappointing because they seem to, a lot of the authors treat them, at least the authors these days. Actually, you know what? I do have an answer. It's The Final Reflection by John M. Ford, which is like a really, really like 1980s era Star Trek novel. But everything John M. Ford wrote.
It's Star Trek Destiny.
Yeah, everything Mike Ford wrote was great. I wish I'd met him. But most Star Trek novels seem to be based upon, at least the ones that have the original crew, seem to be based upon the idea of there's this game called how many episodes can I make fit in one book? How many references to TV show episodes can I fit in one book? And so like there's a book called I can't remember the name of it. It's about artificial intelligence and data, etc., where it includes Data's creator and the Ted Cassidy robot maker, where they put them on the platforms and they spin them around, and it includes the binars, and it includes the Flint from the episode with the immortal Flint, because of course he made the robot wife, and it's like all that stuff is just sort of tied up together. And he gets a score of like 8 because he manages to pull 8 different episodes into one. It's like, yeah, okay. I'm
all right.
Else.
But yeah, no, mine is the Star Trek trilogy, Destiny. It's Gods of Night, Mere Mortals, and Lost Souls by David Mack. I think it gave the Borg a nice like beginning and end, and like they really kind of screwed the pooch when they actually had access to that.
Yeah,
personally,
there was the Star Trek book that was based upon the premise that the Doomsday machines that there was more than one Doomsday machine, and they were built to fight the Borg, which was an interesting idea.
Oh, that is an idea.
It was an interesting idea, but it was executed like a Star Trek novel, so it wasn't very good.
That's fair.
Let's see. Dustin makes the comment that it doesn't make sense that the Babylon 5 station was shut down and blown up when it was only like 30 years old. I never understood that either. I never understood that. Yeah.
It's some Logan's Run bullshit that we're going to go with that. Listen.
Yeah.
What they call it,
Stephen Ross points out B5's defense grid was originally pretty light, and it got a major upgrade later. Yeah, that's true. How many types of Earth Force ships could map their own jump portal? Seems to be the case that all the big ships could.
Yeah. If it was a big one, it had the ability to, but like they were still mainly. Why did my
Stephen Ross says even Centauri starfighters didn't have compensators. In one episode, Sheridan mentioned that Centauri pilots trusted the autopilot enough to perform maneuvers that would cause them to black out. That's an interesting. I don't even remember that, but I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Virtual camera packed up.
Scott says, I wonder how much cheaper it would be with the advent of AI for doing the remastering. I have no idea. But, I
have very specific feelings on AI, and
I just know that Google's AI said that geologists recommend that everybody should eat a rock each day.
Technically, that's true because salt.
Don't think that's what they were talking about.
I know.
What are the chances of Warner Brothers getting
sold?
That's
why I said I added that technically in there, because that was the very important part of that sentence.
Dustin asks, what are the chances of Warner Brothers getting sold? Not a clue. I have no idea. I'm not an industry guy.
Who even knows? But it's not a good look if it does, because we don't need more monopolization happening.
Thomas says Paramount was counting on crazy Blu-rays set sales to justify the cost of TNG remastered, but sales were nowhere near expectations. That's what I heard too.
Again, right at the start of streaming services.
Yeah.
I don't know what they expected when there was an entire shift in the industry.
The TOS remaster was a much smaller project than TNG remaster and was generally paid for by syndication and better relative sales. I can believe that.
In TOS's defense, it also had how many decades more of syndication to be able to help pay for that?
Well, no, but I mean, it would. I don't think that's how that worked. It's not. They don't care. That's all. That's all money they've already made. It's only they'd only make the money. They'd only make the changes if they thought they could sell it in the future. And apparently that worked. One of the regrets I have for the remaster is, they cut like something like 5 minutes, 4 minutes out of those shows to cram more commercials in. An hour of television has gotten shorter over time. And so when they did the remaster for the original series, they remastered the new cuts, not the old cuts. I would love it if they had remastered the old version. And if they want to cut it down for syndication, that's great. But I want to buy the 48-minute version, not the 44-minute version.
Yeah.
But, Paramount makes its decisions based upon they apparently, they must have something in my phone or something where they can read my memory, and they make their decisions based upon how they can most piss me off.
I'm with you, Olive.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, somebody else here is saying John Ford Final Reflection. I would really like to have met Mike. So John M. Ford, he went by Mike. And I know people who knew him because he was a fixture he lived in Minnesota and was a fixture on the con circuit up there. In fact, he used to do this thing called Ask Dr. Mike at the local con. And Ask Dr. Mike was so popular that they just stopped scheduling against it. Because nobody went to anything else. They went to Ask Dr. Mike. And what you do is you would ask him a question, and he would invent an answer to your question, this elaborate answer that, a subject he has absolutely no knowledge of whatsoever. He would just invent something. He was fantastic. He only wrote he wrote a few genre things like the Final Reflection in Star Trek. He wrote the Klingon manual for the FASA Star Trek game, which they would hand to writers who were going to write Klingon stuff for Next Generation. They gave them the game product and said, read this.
I mean, if it's a good reference material, it's a good reference material.
His stuff was just fantastic.
Just because it came from a fan source doesn't mean it's any less, someone did their research, They just happened to have compiled it in a way that they were able to later use actually on the product.
Yeah, Olive points out the Star Trek novels writers' guidelines were stubbornly resistant to anyone but screen characters that limited them. Yeah, for a long time they were. Then they came out with Starfleet Corps of Engineers and the Titan and the other stuff. But for a long time, it's like anytime anybody said, hey, maybe there are other ships in Starfleet. No, there's nobody else in Starfleet. Okay.
A very small fleet then.
And that's one of the reasons why I stopped reading it. It just got...
That's fair. I enjoyed the Destiny one also because you get to see Captain REDUX. So.
Yeah.
I'm not biased. I don't think people shit on Ezri for no reason. No.
Yeah, and it's
I'm sorry. You like the Manic Pixie Dream Girl, and when the Manic Pixie Dream Girl is depicted appropriately on screen, you get pissed off. For shame.
I mean, I think one of the things that I liked about that character was, if I remember correctly, she technically didn't qualify.
Mm-hmm.
She just happened to be the only Trill.
She was the only Trill.
That
she didn't even remotely want to have anything to do with joining. That's why she joined Starfleet as a counselor. She's like, nope, not my circus, not my monkeys, not what I want to do with my life. So she went and had a career. And on the way back, she happened to be literally the only fucking Trill on the ship. And they're like, well, sorry, you got to do it.
You got to do it. Let's see.
One by default.
Thomas says she and the Avatine show up in Star Trek Online, voiced by Nicole DeBeer. So I guess this Thomas guy knows a little bit about Star Trek Online. he knows a little bit about Star Trek. So he's probably laughing right now.
But yeah, no, I like Ezri as a character. I think people just didn't give her enough of a shot because everyone was still salty about Jadzia.
She was also like the Columbo of ship's counselors. That's really funny.
I'm going to need you to explain that one because my brain's not connecting the dots.
I'm not sure it's fully connecting the dots for me, but I'm a big fan of Columbo. I don't know
how to counsel. Can you help me with this?
Yeah. Columbo was always like, you always knew that Columbo was about to go in for the kill because he'd say, and he didn't even necessarily know it. He'd just say, "Oh, I just got one more question," and it would always be the question where the person totally trips themselves up. For the youngsters in the crowd, Columbo was this great TV show with Peter Falk as the Detective Columbo, where Kate Mulgrew got her start playing Mrs. Columbo. And he's unkempt and he's kind of bumbling and stuff like that, but he's got a first-class mind. And one of the things that was interesting about this show that just made it groundbreaking is it's a murder mystery show where in the opening scene you see the murder. You, the audience, know exactly who the killer is, always. It's never a mystery for you. It's a mystery for Columbo. And so the key to the show, it's like watching Sherlock Holmes, except you know the answer. And the entire show is about watching Sherlock Holmes put it together.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, let's see. The Cardassians probably love that show. Yeah. We are currently at the 1 hour and 37-minute mark. I almost thought about starting the show by saying, hey, I think this is going to be a short one. It perhaps could have been a short one because I remember at one point I'm at the 45-minute mark and I'm on slide 12 of 14. But, it always turns out that going through the questions at the end makes the show longer, which is fine. That's actually perfect because when push comes to shove, I continue to be stunned that we've got this many people that decide that the best thing that they can do on their Saturday night is listen to me talk and to interact with me on this show. And I think that's really sad for all of us. But that doesn't mean that I don't really, really appreciate it. I need a cat. I need 2 cats. So for what it's worth, on the last trip back to the storage unit, I prioritized bringing back cat stuff. So I brought all the cat bowls back and all the cat heating pads.
Does that mean Chris will soon have an on-stream buddy as well?
I am hoping so. That is the plan. I want to get a couple.
Okay, everyone, send the cat distribution system mojo Chris's way.
Yeah. I mean, the plan is to get a couple of cats. I mean, that's always been the plan. The question is exactly when I'm going to execute that. And I want to have a carpenter come in and do some stuff. And there's like a plumbing thing to do. And there's part of me that says that I need to wait until I have a little bit of mild construction done. There's another part that says I should do it sooner rather than later. I need to sort of figure it out. That cat is adorable.
He's just a baby.
And
one more.
He reminds me of Buddy.
She.
Oh,
teeny girl. I got one of the 33%.
I in the past have had one of the 33% too.
Hi. You teeny girl. Like, excuse me, mother. You have clothes to the treats.
I'm a big fan of orange cats. No,
the face she just made at me.
I will say that orange, as a general rule, orange cats are not going to win any intelligence contests, but they're all the sweetest cats ever. And, you know,
she thinks she's spicy. She is, in fact, just a baby.
Yeah.
As evidenced by this. Hi.
Yeah, I want to get a brother and sister pair.
Oh, that would be cute.
Although somebody made the observation, because I want two cats that I know get along and will spend time with each other. Somebody made the observation that if you get two cats that like each other too much, they don't need you.
That's true.
I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to take that risk.
Orange Cat fans should go read about the saga of Jorts. Oh, I don't remember the exact details of Jorts, but I know this name.
I seem to recall that wasn't Jorts like a really stupid cat? I seem to remember that. So, all right, I think it is time to call it an evening. Once again, thank you very much, everybody, for showing up. And I did not emphasize it, but next week, let me throw that schedule back up real quick. Okay, next week, the plan is right now, the plan is next week, I will be at this time in Fairborn. Well, actually, by this point, I will be in Columbus at my friend Merle's house, getting ready to go to sleep so that the next morning I can do the 8-hour drive back to DC, or 7.5-hour drive from his house. So no, the plan is no show next week, but a show the week after that. All the stuff can change. The only date on this that is absolutely solid in concrete is the fact that on the 22nd of November, I will be at PhilCon. Everything else is in a state of flux.
Yeah, I will probably be last minute packing next weekend.
I would imagine that you should be. So if I don't talk,
we're going to Runfest on the 1st and leaving for Savannah on the next day.
Well, Lissa, if I do not talk to you before the wonderful event, congratulations.
Thank you.
I say this as a guy who ended up getting divorced. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
Power on. 1 sec. Yes, I have a lightsaber for my fucking wedding, guys. And yes, it is Sailor Moon themed.
So for what it's worth, you are not the first person on this show who's had a lightsaber at their wedding.
Who else?
Andy and Joelle Presby had lightsabers at their wedding. I was not at their wedding. They got, when I met them, they were already married. But they had part of the naval sword arch. Mm-hmm. They had lightsabers.
Oh,
so good for them. All right. I think that's it. So thank you very much. And once again, congratulations, Lissa. And we will see you next time.
Bye, guys.